Last week, Mayor Jeff Lehman joined the councillors of Ward 1 and 2 for a town hall meeting. We have divided the town hall into three different parts, grouped the similar questions together, and edited the responses so you get the up to date information in minimum possible time. Use the timestamps in the description below to navigate to different parts. In the beginning, Mayor Lehman talked about the new challenges due to recent increase in COVID-19 cases, the expected approval of the vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds, opioid crisis, and housing shortages.
But I can tell you as your mayor, the things that are on my mind most right now are the the increasing polarization of the impacts of the housing crisis. The fact that the most affected in our community, the most marginalized in our community, are the most heavily impacted, and that's getting worse. And the fact that so many people are priced out of being able to own or even rent a safe place to live in our community. Never in my life did I think that Barrie would have more, it would be more expensive to rent an apartment in Barrie than in Toronto. But there are so many people who want to live here and such a shortage of rental housing. That's the case today, and that is truly astonishing. So the housing issue is at the top of our agenda, and along with it, the pressure that's being faced and the challenges that are being faced by the most marginalized in our community.
Arrival of new students and residents continue to divide the city, especially Ward 1. It has a strong international student population, which of course rents rooms during their studies at Georgian College. There has been new development on the existing properties to satisfy the growing housing needs. A small section of residents have been opposing the new development. During the meeting, residents asked questions about the absentee landlords and bylaw officers allegedly hired to carry out targeted reinforcement of student rental units.
Um, One thing that is going to affect everybody is that we're working on the budget at the moment, and there's going to be, before the end of the year, we're going to have a whole lot of discussions about what needs to be in the budget and what needs to be out of it.
On the other hand, for the residents of Ward 2, social housing, the proposed supervised consumption site were primary concerns. Councillor Alvin continues to be a strong supporter of both.
And it's unacceptable that we have so many people living rough out on the street. The reality is that housing is a human right and a basic human need, and we have not done enough. All levels of government have not done enough to ensure that everyone has a safe, affordable place to call home. And we had a great meeting of the Affordable Housing Task Force just this morning, and there's going to be some strong progressive recommendations coming forward to City Council on that. I think the other big challenge that we face, and we're seeing it in BC right now, the impacts of climate change and the climate crisis. It's severe weather is just going to get more severe, and the costs of doing nothing are just going to get greater. So we need to act. The city is in the process now of developing a greenhouse gas reduction plan for the first time, and we're going to need funding to back that up. And I hope we can count on the support of the public to make that happen. Because we all have a part to play, but we need systems level change to be able to really address this crisis.
First, let's listen at the issues of Ward 1 residents. There is a lot of development going on in Barrie, whether it's building or maintenance of roads, or new residential or commercial properties. Residents wanted to know when this development work will be done.
We have a question with regards to the development near St. Giles. Is there any updates on that?
There is no update at the moment. I know that there is some activity, some discussion going on, but we have no application at this time. That doesn't mean we won't have one tomorrow, but at the moment we don't.
So we have a question with regards to the proposed development around Johnson Street. The trees at Indian Arrow have been removed, and a couple people are looking for an update whether the trees are going to be replaced and if there's any information about the development going on around there.
Okay, this has been the subject of a lot of discussion over the years. Yes, the builder there has received approval to build the second building. He has achieved site plan approval and has got his permits for the basement part. I'm not entirely clear how far that goes, but he's ready to start building. And the trees, I wasn't aware that the trees were being taken down at this point already, but any work that's going on there is in connection with the building. And the site plan approval process has a landscape plan attached to it, and the developer is required to do all the landscaping that the landscape plan has in it. So those trees would probably be replaced in some fashion or other.
Yeah, those, I think there's a lot of people on this call who know the history on this one. The city actually opposed that building. It was approved subsequently on appeal. And since then, we have tried to work with the developer to ensure that the impacts are as mitigated and managed as possible. So on the specific issue, again, we can help Councillor Riepma with the follow-up detail on the tree removal.
Certainly. Is there any update on the development that's happening on Duckworth, apparently from Mountbatten to Napier?
Yes, in fact, it was in the paper today that the application was deemed complete by the city. And so it'll move forward in the process as time goes along. The application, and I don't have it in front of me here, but I think it was 28 units back-to-back townhouses. So stay tuned, I guess, is the answer on that one.
Comments. So I just wanted to address some roadwork issues next, if we move along. There's some questions with regards to Nelson Road repair, if any repairs are coming, as well as the Blake Road work. When would it be done? Because it seems to be moving quite slowly.
You're right. The road work always takes longer than you'd like it to work. Let me talk about Blake Street for a minute. They're doing a water main replacement there. And of course, you have to build the water main, and then you have to put the services connections across to each house and each building there as well. So it is a messy job, and the contractor has really done a pretty good job in terms of the site, but it's a struggle. There's no question about that. He's also had a few issues, and I know that our engineers are met with him today, actually, to try to figure out exactly when this job is going to be finished. Hoping to wrap it up and clean it up well before winter, but that's still a work in progress. And I appreciate everybody's patience, because it definitely needs that work needs to be done, and it's a tough job, and there's a lot of traffic and a lot of pedestrians in that area, so please be careful. Nelson is a perennial problem. That short piece from Grove South is a problem, and I have been talking to our engineers to see what we can do about that. Yeah, leave that with me, because it is something it's getting worse every year for sure.
We've got enforcement on cutting back North Shore Trail. What's going on with enforcement of those who are cutting back the overgrowth that are not legally allowed to? And will the Lack House be prohibited from cutting the overgrowth, as they wouldn't be grandfathered?
Okay, very quickly on that, we have a consultant on board now. There's going to be a public meeting in January or February, and he's writing a report on how we can better do vegetation management all the way along the trail. You've hit on a real problem. When the city doesn't do it well, then some neighbors take it into their own hands and do it. And then that doesn't work out well either. So we need an overall plan that makes things work. And that's what we're discussing at the moment. And we will have a public meeting in that early in the new year to try to solve that.
Rental units occupied by students near Georgian College has been a subject of heated debate over the past few months. Many residents in Ward 1 have been demanding regulations targeting absentee landlords who rent mostly to students. The city has rejected discriminatory policy as it might not stand in the courts. However, the city has put up more restrictions to limit building of additional units.
With regards to the landlord licensing, the absentee landlord proposal, the city wants to address this issue by using bylaw officers. This resident believes it hasn't worked in the past to clear up the issue, and wondering how we can address these issues going forward.
I think that one lands in my lap. The council decided that we wouldn't do landlord licensing, but instead we would hire a number of enforcement officers who would be tasked with proactively enforcing the property standards bylaw. And the hope is that we will be able to make some considerable difference doing it that way. The concern with the licensing was twofold. One, that it was going to be implemented in the college area initially as a trial, and then whether it would get rolled out across the whole city, that was still up in the air. And then the second concern was that the good landlords would also need to get a license, whereas we really are looking to get the bad landlords whipped into shape. So what the plan is now is to hire a number of enforcement officers who are dedicated to doing property standards, and that they're going to enforce them proactively. In other words, we've always now had, if there was our enforcement has always been complaint driven, which tends to set one neighbor against another, and it just doesn't really work very effectively. So these guys and gals will be working on it proactively. So if they see something, they're going to call it. So let's hope that goes a long ways to solving the problem. If it does, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, we're just going to have to revisit this problem again.
Yeah, and I noticed in the chat a few comments and questions around the additional enforcement. Budget is literally in 2 weeks. And that will be where the rubber hits the road. Council will need to make a decision to increase the budget and fund the additional officers required to move to proactive enforcement. It's actually something that has been asked for by the community in different ways for many years. We've historically moved very slowly. We did add one officer last year, but a substantial investment needs to be made to address the kind of impacts that so many of you are concerned about, and Councillor Riepma is referring to, the property standards issues, the illegal parking problems, the things that really do bring down the situation for neighbors. It's straight up enforcement, and you know, I think it will be a money issue in the budget, but it has been it's been a growing priority for councillors, and I think you know, the question will be whether council fully funds what the resources that are needed to accomplish the enforcement. I hope they do. I'm certainly in favor of it. I know Councillor Riepma is.
Perfect. So a quick question about the secondary units and accessory buildings. They're being built, close to lot lines, according to the residents. What's being done to control these sort of accessory buildings that are permitted?
Yeah, we just passed some new restrictions, and I'll give it to Claire to go through it, but council just increased the setbacks, and it was Councillor Riepma who actually moved a motion to increase the setback so that we don't get these monster carriage homes, which are basically a second home right on the backyards. But go ahead, Claire.
Yeah, that's you're right on. The setbacks used to be, you know, quite small in the rear and on the sides, and we just passed the zoning bylaw to make those bigger so that there are 3 meters on either side and 7 meters in the rear, and basements are no longer permitted. So this, hopefully, the disruption will be a lot less. and there will be bigger setbacks to the existing houses.
Phil Marnelli speaking. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, go ahead.
I am a resident of the Ward 1 Residents Association, or a member, that is, of the Ward 1 Residents Association. And I'm here with my neighbor, Clint Tyler, and we have a question concerning the 75-meter rule with respect to boarding houses. Go ahead, Clint.
Yes, since it was a decision made not to go with the idea of licensing rental properties in Ward 1 as a pilot project, it's now stated, or at least it was implied, that there's a potential that there could be a number of enforcement officers hired if there's enough money in the budget, and it would be for the whole city, and it might be as many as 4 or 5 people. Now, if that is the case, and if it does occur and everything falls into place, will the city now start considering enforcing the 75-meter rule for boarding houses, that there should be a separation between them? Because we have a situation where there are 3 or 4 in a block with 6, 8, 10 people in it. And when I ask anyone about that with the city, they just look at me and literally tune out or say it's just the way it is. And I'm asking, is there a plan to actually enforce this? Because these neighborhoods, because of the economics right now, people can afford to buy these houses for extravagant amounts, put 8 to 10 people in them at $600 a person each a month and make money. And we are now in our area, in this block, we have 5 boarding houses on 1 block, and there's no enforcement. And if we call the city, they don't enforce it. They may send someone out and say, pick up your garbage. But what about stopping people from not following this bylaw? Because it's so important, because once you have a block with more than half boarding houses, it's very hard to get families to move in. And we were getting close to that point. And again, the shock that we felt, our 400 members, by not getting the pilot project is overwhelming. But now to hear that everything is going to be up to whether or not people can justify an increase in the budget, because before it was going to be paid for by people who are in business. These are people who own businesses that were going to pay these licenses. So right now, it sounds like we're at a point where it's almost a gamble now, whether or not in the budget, we may or may not get some enforcement people. And if we do, they may or may not enforce things. So is there a chance to get some clear statement that there will be an enforcement to keep these neighborhoods alive?
Yeah, let me be super clear about that, Clint.
And I hope I don't sound too
No,
passionate.
I don't blame you.
I'm
I know what the neighborhood's been through, and 11 years of being mayor, it has not stopped, and I hear it in every Ward 1 town hall for years. We have not been able to address this problem fully. It got better for a while. It's gotten worse. To be very clear, if we hire more enforcement officers and direct them to conduct proactive enforcement, that's exactly what will happen. So that's their job, and that's council direction. The other thing that you should be aware of, when we talk about enforcement of municipal bylaws, municipal law enforcement, there's no do it or don't do it. It's a law, and it has to be enforced according to enforced according to the law, so that the court, the charges can stand up in court, or the tickets can stand up in court. So I guess my reason in saying that to you is, if council makes a decision in 2 weeks, and like I said, I think there's a number of us that are going to be advocating for it, to invest more in enforcement and move to proactive enforcement of property standards in the college neighborhood, parking standards in the college neighborhood, then absolutely that will happen, because that's what people's jobs are.
Mr. Mayor, or your worship, I really, and as our group, really appreciates what you and Claire and our councilors have done, considering this issue so much in the last few months. You really have. Don't agree with the outcome, but we appreciate what you're doing, and it's a movement in the right direction. How do we, as really one of the wards, and also one of the things I want to mention, we have been approached now by 2 other wards who are seriously going to form a neighborhood association, residents association.
Good.
and we're there to help them. Okay. And if anyone's listening, we want to be there to help because we've got Ward 2, Ward 4, and others that are approaching us saying help, and we're going to help them because, I mean, again, voices have to be heard. How do we help the council hear us in the 3 weeks so that they get a message that, look, there's hundreds and hundreds of us that are desperately needing the support for enforcement? How do we do that? How do we get to council? I don't know. I'm not a politician. I'm a social worker.
No, great question. Write to us by email in your own words. There are issues where form emails come in, people all send the same words. You know, when you've received the same words 20 times, you know, it's one thing. When you write and say, I'm a resident, I've been here for 15 years, you've been promising to fix this, now you've got a chance to. Council, please do it. You know, you can write to council@barrie.ca. You can write to us individually by email, it's effective. That's the most effective thing.
May I ask one more quick question, Mr. Mayor?
Sure. We are a bit over time,
real
so
quick.
it's going to have to be super quick.
How do we tell our people that are afraid to send things to city council because they're going to be people are going to attack them? Because they're afraid. I have people, I'm going door to door, who are afraid to contact city council because they're afraid of repercussions because they're complaining to the city. How do we assure them that their information is held in confidence? I mean,
it absolutely is, but what kind of, are you worried about a landlord finding out who complained? And
yes,
okay.
Yes, also, and also seniors that are I talk to, because I happen to be almost 80 years old, so they talk to me when I go door to door, and they're afraid of saying, look, if I call the city, I'm going to get in trouble. That people in the neighborhood will know it. What do I do? And I said, look,
I think Clint, one of the things that we can do is you can have them call me or email me.
Okay.
And then I can put it to the enforcement branch, and then their name never shows up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'll do that.
Councillor Alvin and Mayor Lehman answered the questions for Ward 2. As schools have reopened and we are heading into a holiday season, the traffic also seems to be back. Traffic near schools has long raised questions about safety and security. A parent and a member of Oakley Park School Council suggested a solution to a parking problem and wanted to know the city's plan to deal with it.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and councillors, for holding this forum. I don't know if I'm on video as well. I'm happy to be on video. That's fine too. My name is Erleen Wong Sing. I live in Ward 1. I'm a parent of 3 children who go to Oakley Park Public School in Ward 2, where I am a member of the school council. This past year, school council has been attempting to have the city look at the traffic and parking concerns on the street in front of our school due to significant safety concerns during drop-off and pickup. But so far, we haven't had any success getting action from our ward councillor. We believe that solutions such as limiting stopping or parking on one side of Davidson Street during peak periods would improve the safety for the children and reduce congestion for the neighborhood. So this would be similar to maybe signage in front of Codrington and Steele Street schools. So I'm coming on behalf of this council to ask if we could have someone meet with us and review the safety issues and potentially implement some changes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Erleen, for being here this evening. And I'd be happy to meet with you on that. This is a problem throughout the city with public schools. The drop-off situation is a tricky one. And there's no simple solution. I appreciate you bringing those solutions, those proposals to the table. You know, sometimes when you ban parking on one side of the street, that can actually increase the speed of traffic because there's less of that visual interruption when you're driving down the street, and it could make it unsafe. So those are things we have to think about. But I will absolutely follow up with the school council after this meeting. I appreciate you bringing that here.
So should I email you directly then and expect a response?
That would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Is a safety question, specifically around some safety concerns, vehicle and pedestrian traffic around Eccles, Perry, and Innisfil. In that S-Bend specifically, there are larger developments coming, and then the SCS is proposed for that area. So is there any comments on how to make that area safer?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That is the weirdest intersection. It's very strange. I actually was talking with our staff a few months ago about what could be done there. Really, it never should have been designed that way to create such a wide open area. When you have that wide open space, people tend to treat it like a freeway. It's just a psychological thing. When it's a wide open space, you go faster. So that definitely poses some safety concerns. In the short term, we are moving around our radar speed boards throughout the city in each ward. Each ward gets allocated a number of them. And that's I see in the chat, it's not very wide open, it's very narrow, but yeah, in the actual intersection itself, it's wide open, but on Perry Street, yes, you're right, it's very narrow. So radar speed boards, I think, are a good short-term solution. In terms of actually retrofitting the intersection, that's a longer-term thing we can look at. And I will follow up with our infrastructure staff on that. I can't recall at the moment if there are any plans in our capital plan for that specific street. And perhaps also there's an opportunity with the new development going in, HIP developments, and there's the potential for a street, for Simcoe Street to continue through the old central lands. Potentially there's an opportunity there for us to add some more permanent and more effective traffic calming measures to straighten that out.
Yeah, I was going to just jump in too there on Councillor Irwin's response and say, you know, that the weird S-bend is created by the odd shape of the building, the old GE factory that's now buried by the bay, and the warehouse that sticks out there. It's my opinion, I'm not sure everybody shares it, that we should not have a road that goes through the former Barrie Central lands and connects to the waterfront. My reasoning for that is that I think it will become very busy. I think it'll become another route to the waterfront. And what is today an already busy street, Innisfil and Eccles, will become exceedingly busy. You've got additional development and you create a connection through. So I'd like to see a pedestrian only connection. And the entrance to the HIP development and the entrance to from Bradford Street and from Innisfil Street not connect. So it would not be a through road. It would be driveways into the redevelopment site. I also think there's some opportunity as that happens and Red Story Field is redeveloped to maybe work on the intersection to slow things down a little. But I think the visibility problem is not going to change as long as the building is there. So what we need to look at is traffic calming through there.
This year, the County of Simcoe purchased the old Ontario Provincial Police Station at Rose Street. The plan is to build social housing after demolishing the existing building. A resident wanted to know the plans to manage traffic after the families move in.
Question and answer here. Wondering about the planned Simcoe County housing project at the former OPP station site on Rose Street. Thrilled for some social housing as I'm just around the corner. But my only concern is the traffic impact with the additional units and the services that will be there, especially with the Bayfield interchange being rebuilt. Every plan put forward by the MTO for that interchange in their planning document makes Rose Street a dead end by the OPP station.
That is an excellent question because I don't have the answer vis-a-vis the MTO. The rebuild of the Bayfield interchange is still a few years out. Probably the housing project will happen first. But that being said, all of the interchanges are to be done over the coming 10 or 15 years. So I think that's probably one for a follow-up, and whoever's asked that question, if it's possible to email us at officeofthemayor@barrie.ca or to Lauren at the email link that you got. We can get an answer as to where the traffic in and out would come from. I do think that to some extent, social housing complex, has lower vehicle requirements than some other forms of housing. But if you're going to have service delivery there, the people have to get there and get out and get back to the rest of the city. So that's a follow-up for us. Thanks for the question.
There was an interesting question about the potential of redeveloping the Sears building at the Bayfield Mall into affordable housing.
Is there any potential to redevelop the Sears building at the Bayfield Mall into affordable housing? Or perhaps the vacant offices at 111 Worsley be turned into affordable housing opportunities?
Keenan and I are smiling because the Affordable Housing Task Force, which is going to report in the first week of January, sneak peek, probably one of our biggest or most bold, I suppose, recommendations will be to start allowing housing as of right on a lot of general commercial sites. I think that's the next frontier. You can build apartment buildings in front of old shopping malls or old big box retail, up against the street where there's transit, where there's shopping, where there's schools nearby. There's no neighbors that are affected in terms of single detached homes that suddenly have an apartment building on top of them because you're out on a commercial strip. And the Georgian Mall site at the north end, that's possible. When it comes to converting a department store, that doesn't really work. I mean, you have to create residential units, you need plumbing for 100 apartments and that sort of thing. And once you get into that, there's really nothing in a department store shell that's worth saving to convert. 111 Worsley, it's very expensive to convert an office building to residential. They did look at doing that, but I believe are continuing to try and lease it. And I do believe have been successful. So they've signed some leases for the complex, both the retail and some of the floors of the office building. So watch for more there over the coming months.
After 2 years of extensive research and consultation, the Barrie City Council approved a supervised consumption site at 11 Incefield Street. However, recently MPP Doug Downey published an online survey on his website inviting residents to once more let their views be heard. A resident wanted to know the city's plan to support the residents.
So much. Now we have a question with regards to the proposed SCS site. Notwithstanding the mitigation strategies put forth by the applicants, what is the City of Barrie's plans to support this part of the neighborhood and the potential decline according to the residents?
Sure, so I can start with that, then Keenan, you might want to weigh in, I think. So of course, the city's approval is a step in the process. The decision as to whether an SCS comes to Barrie is the province's, and it sits with the Ministry of Health. And part of their application is obviously the mitigation strategy that was referred to in the question. I think there's two pieces I would say in response to that question. One is that Barrie Police are going to be very aware that the success of the SCS is contingent on people feeling safe. Not just the users, but the neighbors. And so notwithstanding the nature of what happens at an SCS, I can assure you Barrie Police are going to be very, very aware of the area and making efforts to ensure that no drug dealing goes on in the area surrounding it and those sorts of issues that I know people in the neighborhood are fearful of. I would say from the city, so that's the Barrie Police. I think the second piece of this is that, my concern today is that we have people overdosing and using openly in the area in that neighborhood, in near Milligan's Pond, to the east in the few blocks of downtown, immediately to the east of there. And our hope is that the public spaces that are currently being used will actually no longer be used for open drug use because there will be a big reduction in that activity. And we will be able to, feel safer with using those public spaces. But I think in terms of, if the question is, what would the city be doing in terms of the mitigation strategy? We are part as one of many organizations that are invested in the success of the SCS in reducing the impacts of open drug use and overdoses, both in terms of the deaths, the number of people who are dying, and the the impacts on our neighborhoods. So we're part of the mitigation strategy. And, you know, I think I said at the time, and Councillor Owen may want to weigh in, that if there's some notion that we're just going to like ignore problems that occur there, please do not ever believe that. I mean, I understand that I'm one of the biggest proponents of the SCS. I, along with the leaders of the county, the Barrie Police Chief, the president of the hospital, the chief medical officer of health, just wrote to the province to say, hurry up and approve this because people are dying. But if this thing is not successful, if there are endless problems and the community doesn't have confidence in it, then it's not going to succeed. If there's conflict between the users in the neighborhood, it's not going to succeed. So I guess I just want everybody who is on the call right now and aware of the SCS to know that although it's not our decision as to whether it goes there, it is up to the province. If it is approved, and I hope it is, then my commitment is to be part of the success of that by making it a dignified place to be used by the users and to minimize the impact on the neighborhood however we can. Keenan?
Very well said, Jeff. I completely agree. I think when we're talking about health issues, and this is a health issue, this is a medical facility that we're talking about, a supervised consumption site is a medical facility, we really need to look at the evidence and we need to listen to experts. And the reality that we're dealing with is that to date, there's never been a single peer-reviewed study of any kind that has found evidence linking a supervised consumption site to increased crime in a neighborhood. There's never been a peer-reviewed study that has found a supervised consumption site being linked to increased crime in a neighborhood. So I hear a lot of fear, and I understand, there's a lot of stigma around drug use, a lot of stigma around people who are unhoused, but we can't let fear prevent us from doing what's right and what the evidence supports. And I can tell you that there are existing drug issues in the neighborhood. In the past couple months, I've participated in 3 cleanups at Milligan's Pond and have filled containers full of needles. So, and that's with a needle bin permanently being placed in Milligan's Pond. So there's lots of drug use occurring. It may not be visible all the time, but it's there, it's happening, and we can't ignore it, and people are dying at an alarming rate. And I can't think of a greater priority as a city councillor than doing whatever I can to ensure that my constituents aren't dying. That's kind of got to be top of the list. And I'm confident that we can address your concerns with the mitigation strategies, with the Barrie Police, as Mayor Lehman talked about. Supervised consumption sites work. They prevent death. They prevent the transmission of bloodborne diseases. They prevent instances of public drug use. They prevent instances of discarded needles in the area. They can connect people to vital services, including treatment. So it's the right thing to do, and the evidence supports it. And we got to stop with the misinformation and the fear, because people in our community are suffering, and they've been suffering for too long. So it's time to do the right thing and make this SCS happen, and I will stand by that decision.
Thank you for your comments.
I might just jump in there as well.
Of course, Councillor.
I think that there's no doubt that the community in the area is concerned. I don't blame them for that. And any change is always worrisome. And if and of course, an SCS brings with it, things that people are concerned about. But the problem is in that area. I remember one Sunday afternoon going there, meeting with a couple of people before the council approved it, and we were walking around in that area, and we met somebody that was very, very high on something, and so let's. The other part of it is that we're experiencing double the deaths this year that we experienced last year from a tainted drug supply, and we can't let that go on. That is just not something that, as a city, we can stand by and tolerate. I think that it really does depend on good management when the SCS goes in, and I think that really has to be top of mind from the people that are running it. And I think they've heard that, and I think that we will see a really well managed operation there, and then we can keep on evaluating it as well to make sure that it runs well.
There were some questions from the residents that concerned the city as a whole. Climate change was one of them. The recent flooding in British Columbia has renewed the serious concern about climate change. A resident wanted to know what Barrie is planning to do to address climate change.
Going back to some comments that Councillor Aylwin made, considering what's happening in BC, what is the city overall doing to help support the climate change mitigation?
Yeah, sure. So there's been a group working, it's called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction and Community Energy Plan Stakeholder Advisory Group, quite a mouthful. And we've been working on developing a greenhouse gas reduction plan for the city. The city has had a climate change adaptation plan for quite a while. So how do we adapt our community to respond to the effects of climate change, like increased flooding, more severe storms, et cetera. But we haven't had a climate change mitigation plan, which is how do we reduce our emissions to make sure that climate change in the future isn't as severe and that we can keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius as required by the Paris Agreement. So that group has been working over the past year. We're hoping to have the plan presented to council in the spring. And that's a huge step forward for us as a city. It's going to take a lot of effort and frankly, a lot of funding to make it happen. And sorry, my dog's drinking water in the background. I don't know if you can hear that ringing, but he's thirsty apparently. So when that comes to council, we're going to have a tough conversation about priorities and what we fund in that plan, because it's going to cost far more to not implement that plan. We have to be leaders at the local level and say this is the greatest threat facing humanity, and we need to put our money behind all the actions we can to reduce emissions. And at the same time, the benefit is that it creates healthy, happier communities. By creating more bike lanes, you get healthier, happier people. By reducing pollution, you get healthier kids. So it's a win-win in my books, but we got to start taking that action as soon as possible.
For about 8 years now, has had a guy named Adam McMullen who does nothing but try and reduce the city's own energy consumption. He ran a competition, for example, among the 3 rec centers to see who could knock their energy costs down the most and their carbon emissions down the most. And that was through a combination of retrofits and technologies, and also our own practices in terms of how we were maintaining the buildings. So I think it's an ongoing effort. But yeah, if we ever, it's astonishing to watch what's happening to cities just like us. Like Abbotsford is the size of Barrie. What's going on right now is truly astonishing. We've seen the same degree of increase in severe weather events, particularly rainfall, in a very short period of time. And that on the adaptation side is going to be expensive, but it's necessary. I mean, we're seeing it across the country.
Barrie, like all major cities in Canada, is seeing new condo developments in downtown. But to make Barrie more walkable and livable, downtown needs full grocery stores and entertainment avenues.
So on the topic of downtown developments, what about a grocery store?
Oh, wouldn't it be great? So 10 years ago, when the IGA was sold to Sobeys, and then they were making a decision about its future, I said, and they decided to close it. I actually called them up and said, please don't close this. It's our last remaining grocery store. I remember when we had 3 of them. in the downtown, full grocery store. And to be fair to Nutrition Plus, they are absolutely a grocery store. But you know, in terms of a full service supermarket or full scale supermarket, they were the last. And the Sobeys executive that I spoke to, a vice president at that time, said, well, how much development is coming to the downtown? And at that time, I didn't have a lot to report. We had one building, 15 Maple. And they said, well, call me when there's 5,000 more people living downtown. Well, now there are going to be, at least, and per the last question, quite a few more people living downtown. And that is what is needed to support a grocery store, in the opinion of the chains, who unfortunately now, all the big grocery store developers build big grocery stores. And like everything else, including schools, I don't think our cities are better for this, by the way, but it is the trend with schools, department stores, grocery stores, build giant ones, build fewer of them, and put them out in the suburbs. And it doesn't seem to matter whether we're talking about schools or grocery stores. That's the trend. To get an urban footprint grocery store, by the way, I think there are a couple more coming to the south end, but to get one into our downtown, we need more customers. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you're a greengrocer or a barber or a restaurant. The more customers you have living within walking distance, the stronger the chance of you succeeding as a business is, and the stronger our chance of attracting and keeping a store in the core.
Is there any updates on the downtown theater?
Performing Arts Task Force is coming to council. So we have 3 task forces, one on affordable housing, one on Performing Arts Center, and the third one on West End revitalization. And Claire's on the Performing Arts one. So Claire?
Yes, there's a task force that is hard at work. We are actually meeting tomorrow night again. And we've got sort of what we think the community needs for a theater, what needs to be inside of it. And that report is going to go forward early in the new year to council. So yeah, again, stay tuned.
There were other questions regarding snow cleaning, new YMCA locations, the interesting proposal of free parking for seniors, and recent craze of loud and modified vehicles.
As we quickly approach the snow season, has the city considered having the arms on the snowplow to help stop the pileups?
Yes. Okay. So that video gets sent to me every year of the plow in Alaska that drops the door and stops the snow going into driveways. There's a really direct answer on that. To use that system, the plows have to travel at a much slower rate of speed, which means they would not be able to do the city with anywhere near the fleet we've got. The increased cost is enormous. It's $6 million right now for winter control in an average winter. In a heavy winter, it's more. In a light winter, it's less. When they looked at actually having that kind of a system, even if we could manage where the snow goes, where the driveways are far enough apart, you can do that in a neighborhood where driveways are a long way apart. Where they're close together, there's no room to store the snow. That's the other problem. So unfortunately, it would cause a huge decrease in the number of calls to my office and to every city councilor during the winter, but that system isn't really feasible in a city like ours, unfortunately, both for cost and for some practical reasons.
Thanks. Any updates on the YMCA?
Yes, they're coming to council on December 13th to give us and the community an update on their plans. They are working through the details of going on to the H block, which is what we call the big parking lot right beside the downtown public library. Just to give you a sense, their building is a little bit bigger than the downtown branch, not a lot, but the proposal would see them go there. We will get an update on December 13th, so tune in.
Is it possible for seniors to get parking passes for all of the lots downtown and along the waterfront? Would that be considered by council?
Like free parking for seniors?
Yes, I believe that would be the to get parking passes.
It's never been asked for before. You know, I've been on council for 15 years now. I think I'd have to think about that. I mean, we did free transit for seniors one day of the week, and we've considered expanding that a little bit more. But I must admit, I'm not sure what the case would be We've offered veterans and we've tried to create some parking for disabled permits close to where you need to go. But in terms of why there should be free parking, I'd be interested in hearing the case for that. Let me put it that way. It's never been put to me.
The questions with one final question, loud vehicles. Loud vehicles, modified vehicles, speeding vehicles, as well as motorcycles. What's being done to help mitigate these noise issues that they're experiencing throughout both wards?
It is
Yeah.
not a true town hall meeting without a question
If
about
somebody doesn't
loud
ask
vehicles.
about modified mufflers, it became a real problem during COVID, and I don't know why. There's just that many more modified vehicles on our streets. The police have conducted 2 blitzes. One was an Ontario-wide one. The second one was local. They've been very public about it. They put the pictures on social media and have tried to get the word out so that the sort of enthusiast groups who feel they can install these illegal aftermarket mods get the word that they're very expensive tickets. Unfortunately, it is not the highest priority, of course. We have a police service whose primary problem or primary issue rightly is addressing violent crime, addressing property crime. Noisy vehicles is not always at the top of their list, but they've heard the community. I can tell you that, and they have heard the complaints, and they are continuing to try and conduct enforcement. Council's been twisting ourselves in knots trying to find a way to, either through bylaw or changes to our bylaws, that the police could enforce noise meters, something that might help. Not a lot of communities have had success with this, but it is one of the reasons why we asked the Barrie Police to do more through their traffic unit.
And I'm watching closely in Toronto. There will be a report coming sometime in the first quarter of 2022, I believe, about decibel meters at certain points throughout the city that sort of like photo radar that address noisy vehicles in that way. And as well, I think we need to think about other creative solutions, like lowering speed limits does reduce noise, transitioning more quickly to electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are way quieter. So, and it's also a win-win for the environment as well. So we need to think creatively because there's no easy solution here. Transit as well. We're transitioning our transit fleet to electric. That's going to be much quieter. They're probably one of the biggest culprits of noisy vehicles. And then I don't know how we get people to realize that it's not cool and it's not impressive to have your loud car go down Dunlop Street, disturbing everyone on a patio trying to enjoy themselves. So there's kind of a bit of a cultural issue there too, where we need to change people's mindsets around that.
So thank you everybody for your questions and all of the different topics. This always happens with our town halls. We end up covering a very wide range of issues, but that's what keeps being in local government, being your mayor, being your council, a wonderful job. It is never boring, often challenging because there are issues that we aren't able to or successful in addressing, but there are many that we are, and I hope you will bear with us and continue to work with us as we try and improve our own services and respond to the kind of complaints you brought up tonight, but also hopefully you will see our progress as a community. There's no question we are coming out of COVID very strong economically. I hope that we will start to see that in terms of the impact of the changing development in our community and some of the benefits of that. I firmly believe busier streets are safer streets, more people walking around. We've learned to walk a lot more, or remembered to walk a lot more during COVID. We've now built a Dunlop Street that is much more pedestrian focused. We have open air Dunlop. And I think that's the thin end of the wedge. I think we can create great places for people to be in across our city. And as more people start to live in some of our neighborhoods, that creates more customers for businesses. It creates more eyes on the street. And ultimately, I hope it brings you more good neighbors. I know there are challenges in certain neighborhoods around the college with social issues in areas of our downtown. But I think regardless of what our opinions are, your opinions, my opinions are on how to solve them, we're all committed to trying to solve them and create a stronger community for it.
That was the update from recent town hall by Ward 1 Councillor Claire Ripma, Ward 2 Councillor Keenan Alvin, and Mayor Jeff Lehman. Thank you for watching.